Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Kalai Prayasami. I'm the Director for the Institute for Clinical Research at the National Institute of Health, Malaysia, Ministry of Health. Welcome, everyone, to our first session of the webinar series on demystifying clinical trials and updates in COVID-19. Now, we are most aware that the ICR has been in the forefront of trying to get some of these key COVID-19 webinars, particularly on research and some of those clinical parameters that have been discussed by some of the speakers in the past few webinars. Today, we are gathered together to look at the clinical trials perspective in COVID-19 era. And I'd like to first introduce my co-host today is none other than Dr. Akmal Yusof. He is the CEO of Clinical Research Malaysia. Dr. Akmal, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalai, for having me today. I heard we are going to participants joining us from 5 social media simultaneously. So hello, everyone.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Dr. Akmal. So glad to have you on board today. And it's the first thing for us too, having a co-host together on some of our webinar platforms. So let us go back on some of the housekeeping arrangement that we've made. First is that, for question and answers, we have a Slido app. You're most welcome to type the questions. And both the speakers and ourselves will try to answer the questions as much as possible. As you know, this webinar is open not only to you as a healthcare professional, but also to the members of the public, where there's a certain interest on clinical trials and on the use of digital platforms. So those of you who are frontliners or medical professionals or healthcare professionals who need to have your professional certificate for CPD, please ensure that you have all the details filled in. And in case you missed it, you can always come back to us on the details. Also, the slides as well as the video, often it is nicely packaged together, and we will share this with you later. So in the event you have to rush off or something, don't worry, you can always come back and catch back with us on this video and some of those podcasts that comes together with this. If you'd like to rewatch this, you can go to Clinical Updates in COVID-19 YouTube channel, or listen to the podcast that's often attached to the channel whenever it's available. So back to you, Dr. Akmal.
Well, we are lucky this afternoon to have the honor of having to host 3 panelists for the vast experience clinical trials that they have. The first panelist is Dr. Alan Fong Yin Yip. Second is Mr. Chun Keat. And the third one is Dr. Chia Wee Kui. They will share their experience with regards to clinical trial. And these are the topics that we chose today, which is the introduction and Malaysia experience in phase 1 clinical trials. And the second one would be the COVID-19 vaccine trials, why we still need them. So I would like to thank all our panelists, Dr. Alan Fong, Mr. Chu, and Dr. Chia for taking their time off to join us this afternoon. Dr. Kalai.
Yeah, thanks again, Dr. Akmal. So just very quickly on who Dr. Alan is. Dr. Alan Fong Yin Yip, often called as Dr. Alan Fong. He is a consultant cardiologist at the Sarawak Heart Center in Sarawak. He's also the head of the Clinical Research Center at Sarawak General Hospital. He's often quoted on the research frontiers on a very active platform for almost his cardiology-driven work and first in human type of clinical work. He has participated in over 20 phase 1 to phase 4 clinical trials. He's also the national coordinator for 2 international multi-center studies, and as an investigator, initiated trial champion. He's got more than 40 articles already published in international peer-reviewed journals. Mr. Chu, he's none other than our very reliable and safe pair of hands. He's a technical head in the Center for Clinical Trial ICR at Hospital Ampang, where there's also a dedicated phase 1 clinical trial center under the Institute for Clinical Research. He has in fact participated in over 30 pharmacodynamic and pharmacokinetic type of studies, and also on bioavailability to study compounds, food drug effect, drug formulation, and bioequivalence studies between original drugs and generic drugs. Both of them are more than well qualified to speak to us today. They have very vast experience in clinical trial, both as trialists and also to facilitate many of our clinicians to undertake clinical trials. So without further ado, let us both welcome. First, I think it will be Dr. Allen to present his slide presentation, followed by CK. So please listen, and if there are any questions that you wish to ask during the session, please type in the Slido app, and we'll try to answer it actively while the sessions are ongoing. So Dr. Allen Fong, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalai and Dr. Akmal, for chairing this session and allowing me to start today's lectures. So my role today is to kick off this lecture on the introduction and Malaysia's experience in phase 1 clinical trials. Next slide, please. And these are disclaimers. The outline for my presentation is on an overview of drug discovery and development, phase 1 clinical trials, and when I'm done with that, my co-presenter, Mr. CK Chew, will talk about the Revita drug development, Malaysia's own experience in early phase clinical trials. Next slide. This is the overview of drug development. So to bring any drug to the market, that means every drug prescribed in Malaysia and in other countries have to go through this strictly regulated drug development process. To develop one successful medicine, it can take testing of over 10,000 drug candidates. It typically takes over a decade and can cost over $1 billion. And when we take you through the diagram, from the left at the pre-discovery phase, over 10,000 compounds could be screened for bioactive activity. And then from then on, certain candidates are picked up and undergo preclinical testing. And these are done in animals. Initially small mammals, then large mammals, and then non-primates, non-human primates, before an investigation, new drug submission or IND submission for the regulators to assess the animal data. But because these eventually are to be developed as medicines to be taken or consumed or injected in human beings, they have to undergo human clinical development. So clinical trial programs are designed to undertake this process. For phase 1 clinical trials, a small group of volunteers, up to 100 perhaps, are picked up and then utilized for phase 1 clinical trials. After the data is obtained and analyzed and the drug deemed to be safe, they typically move to phase 2 clinical trials. And that typically is a dose-ranging study. Once we obtain or find the ideal dose, then these drugs move to a phase 3 study, which typically is a very large study and usually involves many centers around the world. And this is a very large effort to obtain the data for NDA submission for the regulators eventually to be reviewed. For example, like the US Food and Drug Administration. And when they have approved that for use, then subsequently the drug is then brought to the market through large-scale manufacturing and then prescription. After a drug is approved and used by everybody in the market, then there is still a phase 4 post-marketing surveillance to look at longer-term effects of the drug. So as you can see, it's a very long, arduous process to bring a single drug to the market. So this is the classical way, a robust manner to develop safe and efficacious medicines that all of you and I take today. Next slide. So in Malaysia, we are now moving into the ability and infrastructure to undertake phase 1 clinical trials. So as you remember, the phase 1 clinical trial is the beginning of the human clinical research program to bring a drug to the market. Typically, a phase 1 clinical trial involves something up to 100 healthy volunteers, where we adjust the dosing plan based on the animal data. We gather information about how drug interacts with the human body. We can identify how much drug the body can tolerate, what its acute side effects are if the doses are increased, and how best to administer this drug to limit risks and benefit is possible, maximize its possible benefits to the patient. Next. So there are many types of phase 1 clinical trial design, and underpinning all this is the safety criteria. So for medical ethics, historically based on the Declaration of Helsinki as the bedrock for human safety. First in human studies are performed in dosing from humans based on animal data. There's also single ascending dose type studies to study the effect of a single dose to the body with dose escalation. There's also multiple ascending dose using multiple dose effects to the body with dose escalation. There are also food effects to study the drug pharmacokinetics. Also, drug-drug interactions are part of a phase 1 clinical trial design to see how the drug affects other drugs in terms of absorption and how it affects in the body, and also for the bioequivalence and bioavailability for the different formulation effects on drug pharmacokinetics. Next, a typical example of a phase 1 clinical trial program is as such. For example, if a drug, a little small dose, for example, 1 milligram, is given to active participants and then assessed for any side effects. If this is shown to be safe, the second cohort of 8 subjects are then given a higher dose. And if that's okay, we move on to the third cohort using a higher dose and moving so on and so forth up to a higher tolerated dose. Eventually, it may be found that the 15 milligram dose, for example, in this program, was found to be the optimal compound done at a single ascending dose program. After that, there is a multiple ascending dose where there are multiple doses of the same drug taken by the subject to achieve a steady state situation where for absorption and excretion, hopefully we can understand the drug pharmacokinetics better. And the subsequent cohort 7, as you can see, a higher drug level or the 15 milligram dose is then also used in this research. So in addition to that multiple ascending dose, there's also the food effect. As you can see, a 15 milligram dose drug here, and to see how a food affects drug absorption and other pharmacokinetic parameters. For example, a common drug used in the market is paracetamol, an analgesic. So if you take paracetamol with food, the absorption typically is decreased. Even different types of food can affect absorption and pharmacokinetics. For example, a high carbohydrate meal can even delay the onset of the analgesic action, the painkiller action of paracetamol, compared to a high protein or a high fat type diet. So food effect, again, also assessed at a clinical trial program. So as I mentioned earlier, drug-drug interaction, bioavailability, and bioequivalence type studies to look at formulation are also other examples of phase 1 clinical trial programs. Next slide, please. So as such, in the last few years, the phase 1 clinical trial guidelines was set up. The phase 1 clinical trial guideline working group commenced in 2016 and initiated, supported by Clinical Research Malaysia, and then launched on the 2nd of November 2017. And as you can see, a very proud moment in the context of Malaysia's phase 1 clinical trial ecosystem. Next slide. In addition to this, there was also the regulatory guideline on phase 1 unit accreditation at the NPRA, and this releases phase 1 unit inspection and accreditation in June 2018. And I'm very pleased to report that our site at the Clinical Research Center at Strathclyde General Hospital attained this accreditation following inspection in 2019 as a site for phase 1 clinical trials. Next slide. As safety is a key feature of a phase 1 clinical trial, Malaysia also embarked on the National Healthy Research Volunteer Register, as you can see. And at this juncture, I will now pass the mic to Mr. C.K. Chew, my co-presenter, to explain about this and the subsequent RAVIDA trial program for phase 1 clinical trials. So over to you, CK. Thank you.
Thank you, my fellow colleagues, Dr. Alan Fong, and sorry for the slight glitches there. In Malaysia, because we are focusing on the healthy volunteer trial, at the same time, because we know that the phase 1 clinical trial are mainly healthy volunteers, sometimes it could be patient-based. And most of the time, healthy volunteers, when they join the trial, we would like to ensure the safety of them when they are participating in a healthy volunteer-based clinical trial. And also, how do we ensure the safety? We would like to ensure the safety by protecting them to have not over-volunteering themselves in between trials so that they will not join too many trials in such a short time frame. And this NHRVR register would enable for the trial site to ensure that healthy volunteers will not over-participating themselves in the trial center. And this ultimately with the endpoint of protecting the safety of the healthy volunteers. With the Malaysian clinical trial phase 1 guideline and also the regulatory phase 1 inspection and accreditation program, with this National Healthy Research Volunteer Register, we hope it will work in a synergistic manner to ensure the conduct of phase 1 clinical trial are conducted in such a professional manner and in a safe environment. So let us look at the overall bird's eye view of the types of phase 1 clinical trial that is conducted in Malaysia. This is the trial that has been registered in clinicaltrial.gov. There is a total of 49 of them, and it was conducted in a diverse range of multiple disciplines. 29 of them is actually completed and 12 of them is actually ongoing. The top list of the phase 1 clinical trial is oncology, ophthalmology, hematology, followed by cardiology and psychiatry and neurology. Out of these clinical trials, phase 1 clinical trial that is conducted in Malaysia, the majority of these trials are coming from drug trials. 65% of them are actually from drug trial. 19% of them is from biological product. It could be stem cell, it could be monoclonal antibody. And lastly, 12% of them are from device trial. So the landscape of phase 1 clinical trial is conducted in Malaysia. It is not just drug trial, but it's a composition of drug trials, biological product, and device trial as well. Now, I would like to share with you that some things that holds dearly to our heart, which is RAVIDA. I'd like to share the experience from phase 1 to practice to increase and enhance accessibility of hepatitis C treatment. It is actually developed through a South-South collaboration between Malaysia, Thailand, and Egypt, with the partnership with NGO as well, Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative, DNDI, and also Doctors Without Borders. I'd like to share with you the RAVIDA drug development layout. As we can see, like what my colleague have shared previously, there is phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trial. It composed of myriad of phases of clinical trials to ensure the drug is tested well for the safety and efficacy before it is brought into the market for the practice, for the population. So phase 1, it was done in a few different trials. The single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose in healthy volunteers that was done in 2011 October. At the same time, this was the same trial that also studied the effect of the food to ensure that the study drug does not, we will be able to understand further on the pharmacokinetic profile, whether does it affect by the food when it is taken by the healthy volunteers and also hepatitis C patients. Subsequently, when they understand the pharmacokinetic profile, they further move on to the drug-drug interaction studies to study about the potentiality of drug-drug interaction from different inhibitors. It was believed at the lab level, they found that there is potential where it is showing weak inhibitions by CYP, 2C9, and CYP, the midazolam and omeprazole. So they found that there is no clinical significance of drug-drug interaction, which is quite a robust drug. And then furthermore, they follow up with a bioavailability to study the formulation effect, the capsule versus the tablet. What is the differences between these two? And then subsequently, they follow up with a phase 2 studies, which is done in US, a dose-ranging study to check whether this rabidospray actually works with what dosage level, a combination with other antiviral to see the efficacy of early signs of efficacy in treating hepatitis C. And subsequently, followed by the phase 2/3 clinical trial, which is started off in Egypt. They studied the rabidospray plus the sofosbuvir, the efficacy towards the treating of hepatitis C genotype 4. The result was quite promising. It shows 80+% of efficacy towards the cirrhotic patient and 90+% towards the non-cirrhotic patient. And 2016, where is the first time brought into Malaysia to conduct the phase 2 and 3 trial to study the pan-genotypic efficacy of towards the pan-genotypic of hepatitis C virus. It started off during the time that is split into 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 is the early stage where we recruited 301 patients, and stage 2 subsequently followed for more genotype patient recruitment. During the first stage 1, there's some changes in the logistic arrangement, whereby the manufacturing of the rabidospray tablet has to be changed from Egyptian site to the Italy site. For that matter, the trial of the phase 2/3 has been halted for a while and jumped back to the phase 1 to study about the violence of the drug formulation. So for the phase 1 studies, let me share with you the what is done in these pharmacokinetic studies. So generally, it's actually trying to study the rabidospray formulation produced by Doppler in Italy versus a formulation produced by Egyptian EPI, with a sample size of 36 healthy volunteers. The study design is a phase 1 open label, 4 periods, 2 sequence, 2 treatments, single dose randomized crossover bioequivalence studies. So we have managed to recruit the healthy volunteers, screen them once they are fulfilling the exclusion-inclusion criteria. We randomized them with a total of 36 subjects. They were actually being fasted for at least 8 hours. And subsequently, the next day, they were given 200 milligrams of rabidospray manufactured by Doppler, and another group of healthy volunteers, the subject receiving rabidospray from Egyptian company. Then they will go through period 1 to go numerous blood sampling to actually understand the drug concentration of the rabidospray in the blood to get the profile, the AUC curve of the rabidospray in Doppler and also in Egyptian EPI drug. After the period 1 they finish with the 48 hours, they will discharge from the study center that is held in Hospital Ampang. And then they were given a washout period of 7 days to ensure that the drug ravidastrate that has been taken in period 1 has been fully excreted and eliminated from the body. The same goes for the other group. After 7 days, they come into the study unit center for period 2 to repeat the whole sequence again, whereby they will give the same subject was initially given a Doppler product. They will come down to period 2 and receive an EPM product, and vice versa. This will actually carry on for period 3 and period 4, and the collection of the pharmacokinetic data to ensure actually the ravidastrate from Doppler and ravidastrate from EPI has the same kind of pharmacokinetic profile. After they have finished the period 1, period 2, period 3, period 4, the healthy volunteers, the subject will undergo through a post-study safety assessment to ensure they are not affected by the study drug. At the same time, they are also healthy as before they begin the studies. So once the study is completed, we found that they are actually bioequivalent in terms of the drug formulation from Doppler and also from Egypt. And that is when the phase 2/3 studies continue to be conducted for the stage 1. And then until now, we have completed the stage 2 recruitment, and it is currently under ongoing follow-up phases of those subjects. At the same time, recently in 2021, there is a new clinical trial, phase 2/3, headed by principal investigator, our Dr. Razi, leading these clinical trials to study the differences of 8 weeks versus 12 weeks regime. We hope to see that 8 weeks regime will be as efficacious as 12-week regime, so that the treatment of the hepatitis C patient can be treated in a shorter manner with less resources involved. So this studies is also currently just started and also ongoing. So 2018 April, this is the stage 1 result that has been came out. The overall result has been quite impressive. 97% of these patients who receive this ravidastrate plus a combination of sofosbuvir with the 12-week regime towards the non-cirrhotic patient and 24 weeks regime towards the cirrhotic patient, it shows an overall cure rates of 97%. These are the, Malaysia is predominantly genotype 3, showing 97%. Regardless of the status of cirrhotic or non-cirrhotic, the efficacy is similar. HIV or non-HIV also very similar. Prior to HIV treatment or without prior HIV treatment is very similar. So all towards the so impressive result have been shown that this product, this ravidastrate, is quite very efficacious in terms of treating hepatitis C patient. So with that, with this amazing result, Pharmaniaga, the license holder of this ravidastrate, put up the submissions to our local regulators, National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency, for the submission of this ravidastrate to treat hepatitis C treatment. And Malaysia, on 4th of June 2021, became the first country in the world that conditionally approved Ravida, the brand name of this product, to be used in combination with other study, we've used the other drug to treat the hepatitis C infection among the adult patient. So with this, we have been always trying to strive for research that really matters to the patient, along with the tagline, ICR, research that matters to the patient. Thank you. I hand over back to our moderator.
Thank you, CK, Dr. Alan Fong. Dr. Alan Fong has comprehensively explained us with regards to the drug development program, and with that illustrated by illustration by CK with regards to a real drug development by using Ravida or Ravidasphere. If you have any questions to ask both of the panelists, please type your questions in the Slido. We will start our question and answer session after Dr. Chia's presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Chia Wee Kui. He is a physician in internal medicine and geriatrician, currently the head of medical department at Clinical Research Center, Taiping Hospital. He's a dedicated clinician and passionate teacher and keen researcher. He's very active in clinical research and holds several professional positions at the national and state level. Just to name several, he is currently one of the committee members for the COVID-19 Vaccine Selection Subcommittee, Ministry of Health, and the Taiping Hospital site principal investigator for the phase 3 clinical trials of SARS-CoV-2 vaccine developed by the Institute of Medical Biology Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. Now, without further ado, please allow me to invite Dr. Chia to share his presentation. Welcome, Dr. Chia.
Thank you, Dr. Akmal. Let me share my screen. Thank you, Dr. Akmal. Thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you to everyone for spending the Wednesday afternoon for a sharing session on this topic on COVID-19 vaccine trial. Mainly to ask, why do we still need these trials when we have vaccine being rolled out currently? This is just a disclaimer slide. So the content of this sharing session will be very targeted. Only two main topics: why is it still needed, and what are the requirements from the trial participants, hoping that we can complete the sharing faster so that we have more times to for question and answering sessions, which will make it more interactive. Okay, so before we go further, we need to go back to the basic and maybe just understand the basic of vaccination. So vaccination is basically something that it has to be simple because it's public health measures, safe, effective, in a way that protects people from harmful disease. And COVID-19 is definitely a disease that fulfills this criteria. The most important keyword that I highlight here is safe and effective. Okay. And how vaccine works is basically it will train the body before the actual encounter with the disease. It will train the body immune system in terms of the production of the defense through antibodies. Okay, so this is a graphic illustration that vaccine enters into our body. It basically exposes our body to the pathogens. In this case, it's COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2. So now our body now are exposed to it, because the problem with COVID-19 pandemic is that majority of, in fact, when it started off, almost all of the human population are not exposed to this disease before. So this is the major reason why it's the pandemic and this that is causing the problem that's causing today. Okay, and so this is one important thing that we have to realize, and sometimes it's still a myth among people, is that vaccine, because it only contains either a kill or weakened form of the germs, it does not cause a disease in a person. So for COVID-19 vaccine, for example, and I will name few of them that have been approved by our national MPRA, none of them contains a live vaccine or a weakened vaccine. In other words, there is no way a person can get infected from vaccination. So if a person gets vaccination today, and if the nasal swab of the COVID-19 turns positive, rest assured that that positivity is not from a vaccine, okay? Because biologically it's not possible for a vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, to cause an infection. So again, generally vaccines mainly are given through injections. These are general, not COVID-19. Some are given through mouth, and some are through using spray through the nose. And we know that COVID-19 vaccine, there are now studies being approved in some countries like Australia. We will see the data probably in a year or two time using the spray, nasal spray method. But mainly the method of COVID-19 vaccination is through injection, and injection here is through the intramuscular. So you'll see them injecting through the deltoid muscle of the arm. Okay, so this falls into the reason of clinical trial for vaccines. Mainly, no matter how complex the protocol of a trial may look like, the basic fundamental part of a trial is no different from one to another, is to prove safety and efficacy. Okay, so as explained by CK and Dr. Allen just now, just like any other trial, other clinical trial, you have the phases of clinical trial that a vaccine has to go through. Before entering into the human phase, you have the preclinical or animal studies. Then it enters into phase 1. Phase 1 is mainly looking at safety. So the number of participants here will be minimum. Then once the safety is assured, then the vaccine goes into the phase 2, which then look at a bit more on efficacy now, but the number of subjects or participants here are still smaller. Again, safety data are collected in phase 2, and only if it passes efficacy and safety data of phase 2, then a vaccine goes into the phase 3 efficacy and safety clinical trial. So many people may ask, like why COVID-19 vaccine has entered into the market faster than any vaccine in the history of mankind. But rest assured that in terms of safety, in terms of the phases of clinical trial, there is no cutting short or making it faster. There are many reasons why COVID-19 vaccines entered into the current phase now faster than any, and I will just name a few. For example, one of them, we need to look at the biology of the virus itself. It is a single-stranded virus, which makes it relatively, not necessarily easy, but relatively faster to have a complete mapping of the genomic, which makes it easier to study which part of the gene that we need to develop the vaccine. The second part is that when the phase 1, phase 2 clinical trial was started early and mid of 2020, we know that the cases are very high in the Western state where the study are done. So you get the event rate very high. So if you have a vaccine that is tested on a very rare disease, you may take many years to get enough events to see whether it's efficacious or not. This is not the case of COVID-19 vaccine, where the cases were very high and you get very fast the efficacy data out. Okay, and one of the third reason is, of course, also the commitment and the budget that is involved. We know that in the normal phase of vaccine production, you need to have at least proof efficacy and safety before mass production occurs. But we know for several of the vaccines now in the market, there was support in terms of financial support, where the production of the vaccine goes hand in hand with the research phase. In other words, it is a risky step to take, but it was needed at that time. And when the vaccine entered into the phase 3 and shows efficacy, all the vaccines are now ready to be dispatched out for you. So there are many reasons, I just named 3, that the vaccines that you see today in the market for COVID-19, it is faster for other reasons, but definitely not because corners are cut in terms of safety. And therefore, trials are important. Okay, and when we hear it from the first country that approved the COVID-19 vaccine trial in UK, the first will be the Pfizer-BioNTech, also known as Comirnaty. Malaysia, first dose was given to our Prime Minister late of February, and on the March of 17th, he was the first person to get the complete vaccination. But we need to also realize that the vaccine that is now approved are under the emergency authorization. What it means is that in fact, the trials of the vaccines that is used now is not completed yet. They are still in the process of completing the 1 year to 2 years of the planned protocol. Okay, so emergency authorization is given again only when certain degree of safety and certain degree of efficacy data has been obtained. So for safety, at least there must be generally 2 months of safety data from at least half of the participant passing through the 2 months period. And the reason of 2 months is generally most of the short-term and intermediate short-term side effects of vaccine occurs within 45 days, and with another 15 days buffer, 60 days is generally the time period accepted as a minimum, and also a short-term efficacy data that is proven. So again, because COVID-19 was infection rate was high in some of the countries that the Pfizer vaccines has been started, the short-term efficacy data could be obtained within the 2 months. So you will see in situation where sometimes you may have 2 months safety data already obtained, but still you have to wait for the efficacy data before you can get an emergency authorization, even for a vaccine. Okay, and we are not talking about full approval yet. So we now know that currently this is the rate of vaccination globally. This is just another sample of that. And if you look at here, the darker the blue means that the higher rate of vaccination. So that many countries are yet to achieve any significant vaccination, meaning that there's still much more room to develop more choices of vaccines so that we can vaccinate globally. So this is a mass vaccination we are talking about. Currently, we know there are 5 vaccines that's approved for Malaysia, but currently the one in use are Pfizer's, Oxford, and Sinovac. Current vaccine trials in Malaysia, 2 are approved by MPRA. The first one is by the Institute of Medical Biology, Chinese Academy of Medicine Science, China. This has completed the recruitment phase and now is in the follow-up phase. The second one, a couple of months ago, has been approved and now starting to recruit by the Kantai Biological. And we know that there are several other in the pipeline. One in the near future will be the mRNA vaccine by the Suzhou Abogene, as well as the Yunnan Bovax biotech company. So there are still ongoing clinical trials coming to Malaysia. These are in Malaysia, the one that I'm listing, okay, in Malaysia. So some already completed recruitment in follow-up phase, some are still in recruitment, some are waiting for MPRA for approval to start the study. So there are a few terms I would like to share here. Efficacy and effectiveness. A trial proves an efficacy of a vaccine, and then in the real world, we will see the effectiveness of vaccine. So the difference is that efficacy is obtained to see the degree of the vaccine protection in a controlled environment, and effectiveness is when you use it in the real world. Okay, and the other term that is important to understand in clinical trial of vaccine and also other clinical trials, randomization and blinding. And again, I will explain the importance of randomization later on in my subsequent slides. And also the other term that I would like to share here is because we are now hearing more and more of this kind of headlines in news, for example, it's important to understand what it means. So this is a term called the base rate bias. When you hear, for example, half of the infected are vaccinated, I want to show a diagram below to show that as a vaccination rate grows higher or the base rate goes bigger, for example, here 83% vaccination. If you look at the left corner, the vaccinated column, okay, that is the 83%, leaving the remaining population unvaccinated. There were 4% infected, and I think that the actual number is smaller. Okay, so there's a difference between half of the infected vaccinated and half of the vaccinated are infected. Okay, so now the question, why do we still need the clinical trial? Again, because as we know, the vaccine trial that's approved now are all under emergency authorization. We need at least usually 1 year to 2 years to get a longer safety data. And also it's important to have a clinical trial to continue on to know the effect of the waning effect of vaccine, meaning that over a period of time, how well does the vaccine still protect us? Because in the real world, you may not get this information directly. Because, for example, if now you have increased number of vaccinated people getting infected, is it partly because of the vaccine effect is reducing, or is it because, for example, the policy has changed, certain restriction has been relaxed, so there's no more comparator without a clinical trial? And also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we need clinical trial to have more additional vaccines to meet the worldwide demand. Okay, and why don't we convert all clinical trial to observational? Again, because of the bias, as I mentioned just now, because if there's no comparator, we cannot see the actual effect of the vaccine. If we have no placebo, then people who gets the vaccine may change the behavior, maybe more relaxed and get themselves high risk of getting infected. People who know they are on placebo, for example, may be more careful. So in the observational trial, you don't have the blinding effect anymore. So you will not have that information. And when you have, again, mass vaccination, when there are events occurring after the vaccination, we really will not be able to tell whether this is attributable to the vaccine or is by chance. So these are some of the reasons why clinical trials are important to be there and need to be completed. Again, some myths that may be still present is that some may think that participation into a trial is like a guinea pig, but the truth is that there are a lot of safety measures put in place to ensure safety of participants. There will be an independent review board, ethics board, to look at the conduct of the researcher. All the researchers are qualified, trained, and experienced. The research site must have adequate resources, and there must be a medical personnel, whether a doctor or dentist, to manage the participants in case of any medical issues. And of course, there's a continuous monitoring of effectiveness and safety throughout the trial period. Okay, and what is important for the clinical trial participants, those who are already in the trial or planning to be in one, is to, of course, maintain safety. We hope that they still continue to comply with the national SOP, but more importantly, is also to timely report any symptoms they have to the research team, and to be able to continue on with the research requirement of 12 months, or in some study up to 24 months, because that is very important for us to know the effectiveness and the safety of a vaccine. And of course, not to receive any other vaccines during the period of the research period, because that can again confuse. You get two vaccines, not sure whether which one is working, for example. So in summary, volunteers for vaccine trial are altruistic, but just rest assured that the safety of the volunteers are the top priority, and the data that's generated by the volunteers today will help to bring the world one step closer to end the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Chia. We had three very experienced panelists today, and they spoke to us about how introduction into the phase 1 trials, the challenges, as well as the conduct of it, and of course, on top of it, the regulatory components and how phase 1 trials have accelerated in our country over the last many years now, and we see ourselves positioned well together with the Clinical Research Malaysia and attracting very early studies into our country. I'm quite excited to see some of the questions here. So if there are other questions, so please add on to the Slido. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of questions first. So perhaps I will ask CK on the first question. This is how to reach recruitment target for a phase 1 clinical or phase 1 vaccine trial. Did the study team advertise on social media about the trial? What is the content and what was your strategy? So perhaps you could elaborate a little bit to us, Mr. CK.
Thank you, Dr. Carline. The recruitment strategies for clinical trial are usually done before the clinical trial commences, actually, in the sense that we draft up, develop the advertisement, And the advertisement will be actually designed for potentially WhatsApp group, social media, or even poster. And this will be submitted to our ethics committee board, MIC, for them to review. So after they have been approved this advertisement, then we will use this advertisement to help in our recruitment to reach the target audience, the healthy volunteers. So those who are actually interested to volunteer in a phase 1 clinical trial, not just phase 1, it could be other trial as well, potentially using the same method. They will actually contact us. At the same time, we also have our healthy volunteer database where they have consented from the very beginning before the trial even started. They actually have offered themselves to give their names and their contact number. In the event there is any potential trial that is going to be conducted, we can actually refer to this healthy volunteer database to contact them so that they can actually respond to us whether they are having the interest to join the trial and whether they have the correct appropriate schedules to join the actual conduct of the trial. At the same time, we also rely on this method, which is quite conventional methods, but very effective, which is the word of mouth. For those volunteers who have joined our trial before, they will share their experiences and then they will actually refer to their friends and family members. Sometimes they may bring along their friends to join the trial. So through word of mouth is one of the most effective methods to do the recruitment. So usually for the duration of about 2 weeks time to a month time, we should be able to get the required numbers for the phase 1 clinical trial. For instance, 36 subjects, we will probably ask for 45 to 50 healthy volunteers to come in for the screening. So these are the usual methods that we usually use to engage the healthy volunteers from the public.
Yeah, thank you for that, CK. So going on from the first question, the second question, it's again an anonymous question. It's about it could be difficult to get approvals for trials in Malaysia. What is ICR doing to facilitate this process to make Malaysia attractive to international sponsors? I guess Dr. Akmal is more in fact certain that he's able to share some of the work CRF has been doing, but also from ICR's perspective, it is a conduct of trials. The way we conduct our trials and the timeliness and the reporting mechanism and making sure that we are up to date with our GCP and so on and so forth makes it viable for ICR to facilitate the conduct of trials. But in the real international arena, CRM is the champion for our country. So perhaps Dr. Akmal, you may want to elaborate on this.
Thanks, Dr. Kalai. I don't think it's very difficult to conduct clinical trials in Malaysia as long as we follow the rules and regulation and what is stipulated by the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency and also the Medical Research Ethics Committee. I believe the trials can be approved in Malaysia in 6 to 8 weeks. Having said that, within this situation of COVID-19, we've seen the clinical trial has been approved in a very speedy manner. Now, this comes to how we attract clinical research to Malaysia. It's through how we deliver clinical research within speed, reliability, and quality. We have several platforms that we conduct promotions of Malaysia. And the beauty about Malaysia is that it has this value proposition that may not be available in other countries. For example, we are multiracial populations. At the end of the day, you've heard about the pharmacokinetics and pharmacogenomic study. It is good to do in Malaysia when we have at least 1/3 of the world population reside in the country, meaning 1/3 of world genomics actually is residing in the country. So I hope that I answered that questions for the audience. Thank you.
Very well said, Mr. Dr. Akmal, very well said. I think the experience CRM brings to the sponsored trials in the country is well for other sponsors to follow through too. I think he is understating how effectively CRM is doing it. We know from ICR's perspective, the role CRM has been doing to bring sponsors for many of these trials in our country. So I'm going on to the next question. Clinical trial subjects may be compensated financially. And so perhaps there are ethical issues, in particular during MCO, where someone who may have some form of a financial issue may volunteer to participate in this kind of trials. Perhaps I can ask Dr. Chia's opinion on this. Is there an ethical measuring up towards this issue of financially incentivizing people to undertake trials?
Yeah, hi. So let me just, clinical trial, maybe, let me just understand. Clinical trial subjects may be compensated financially. So how would ethics measure in the times of MCO? I think that it may be a two separate topic here, because when you participate in a trial, what we want to make sure is that the participation is truly volunteer, by volunteer means, and any compensation made is mainly to compensate for the subjects or the participants' time, as well as their basically their time and their mileage, to petrol, to or the transportation that brings them to the clinical trial site. So I think there is a separate measure. I don't think that in terms of MCO is any different in terms of the ethics approach into the compensation, or rather reimbursement of a participation in the trial.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chia. So I think it's correct in the sense that trial participants are basically protected by the clinical trial agreement, and how the protocol ensures that there is no incentivizing them to participate in a trial beyond the fact to compensate them for the loss of their earning for the day, travel, and so on and so forth. So that is very well regulated in our country. Next question. How about clinical trials for traditional medicine, which is used widely in China, but without pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics data? So perhaps Dr. Allen, you could answer this question coming from Lee.
Dr. Kalai, this is a very intriguing question, and Lee LS has really put us on the spot on this one. This is a very interesting question, particularly because traditional Chinese medicines do not have, typically do not have identifiable compounds directly to assess the traditional pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic data. Therefore, it usually leverages on surrogate markers. For example, if the drug is thought to improve or reduce inflammation, inflammatory markers are used as surrogate markers to assess the effectiveness, or in this case, the efficacy as well, of the compound. So this is a typical use of surrogate markers. Also, for traditional Chinese medicine, more often than not these days, technology is now available to isolate the bioactive components. So in very large institutions, they are also actively looking for the bioactive components of these traditional Chinese medicines, which up to a generation ago could not be identified closely. But I think going forward, with the technological advancement in analytical chemistry, as well as using modern techniques, I think we would see traditional Chinese medicine move leaps and bounds and produce clinical trial protocols that conform to the most modern of what has been able to be conducted these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Dr. Ahmad, you wish to have some questions answered from the Slido?
Yeah, I think that there's one question. Can we consider Malaysia to bring in first in human trials moving forward? Will there be any challenges? Maybe Dr. Allen, you could help to answer these together with CK.
Well, I think I can go first. Thank you, Akmal. Yes, I think with the support from Clinical Research Malaysia and the Ministry of Health and many other organizations, we can definitely move Malaysia forward in first-in-human trials being conducted. We have key investigators now undergoing advanced training, including for oncology, example like Dr. Voon in Canada, to be returning to Malaysia to undertake such first-in-human trials. In addition, the infrastructure is now available in Malaysia to safely conduct such studies. We're also building up world-class investigators and clinical research organizations such as Infokinetics to support such endeavors outside the usual ecosystem of the established international partners. So I think on the whole, we definitely should consider bringing Malaysia forward first in human trials, now that we are both the guidelines as well as the regulatory processes for accreditation and conduct of such studies. Thank you.
And also the National Voluntary Registry as well.
Yeah, I totally concur with my colleague Dr. Alan Fong. At the same time, in Hospital Ampang, we also have Dr. Chun going to come back as a clinical pharmacologist to help to interpret the pharmacological data, also the preclinical data, to ensure the starting dose for the first in human will be appropriately evaluated and subsequently recommended for the subsequent dose escalation. So we are actually compiling all the recipes to ensure the first in human will be conducted in the most appropriate manner. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to put in one question and answer it myself very quickly. This is about, is that a guideline for managing those who participate in COVID vaccine trials to receive vaccine through the National Immunization Program? Yes, they are eligible to receive the vaccine at the end of the trial phase, and their names as well as their proportion of vaccine is already provided for under the program. So that answers that question. Can we move to the next one? So Pfizer combined phase 1, 2, 3 trials, NCT 04368728 in the development of SARS-CoV-2 RNA vaccine. So this is the Pfizer's registered vaccine trials. The question is, does IMR consider these strategies in COVID vaccine development? So I think since IMR is not here, but nevertheless, in any vaccine trial, you obviously will have to fulfill, as what Dr. Akmal has said, the regulatory requirement that is necessary for the conduct of all these trials. And for that, these phases of trial is necessary and therefore would be considered important for the vaccine that is also being developed in our country. One other question, would there be a platform by MOH or MOSTI to promote ongoing COVID trials? And people might be convinced if MOH promote the ongoing trials. I think, Dr. Akmal, we could answer this question.
Yes, I think there are works that is going on, starting from the what we call as the vaccine diplomacy through 3 different ministries, and as a result, we have 1 clinical trials that is conducted at the moment and already recruited well, which has been illustrated by Dr. Chia, and there are many others coming in from other developers in a very different type of platform, like the inactivated and also the mRNA vaccine. So watch that space. I think there's a lot of collaboration with MOH and MOSTI to bring in the clinical research into Malaysia.
Okay, so there's another question: will the government support on advertising vaccine trials? So this is a question perhaps for industry to look at how conduct of trial is done. So maybe CK, you could answer this.
As long as the trial is conducted by one of those government TCM sites as investigators, they will actually be able to approach ICR for the social media platform to help to actually promote the clinical trial that is vaccine trial that's going to be conducted, as long as the advertisement use is actually approved by the MIC. So in short, they actually can approach the government will support.
That's spot on. All advertisement need to be approved by the MREC, CK. That's a very spot on comment. And for this matter, sometimes there are clinical trials which have difficulties in recruitment, and with the helps of the investigator and the approval from the MREC, the sponsors actually, or the company that actually conduct the clinical trials, actually put in the advertisement on behalf of the investigator on the media. So that helps in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, so that clarifies on the role of advertisement, the need to have it approved, and also if you have an approved site, then obviously you can use that for the recruitment of trial volunteers.
Maybe
So
I'll
next
answer one
question.
question, Dr. Kalai. What is the role of Clinical Research Malaysia acting in clinical trials? We work as a site management organization that helps to provide the clinical research first to come to Malaysia in terms of a one-stop center. We promote Malaysia as the clinical research center with the ability of the delivery of speed, reliability, and quality with the track records. And all these are putting in together the cooperation between not only one stakeholder, but many stakeholders in Malaysia, inclusive of Institute of Clinical Research, the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Authority, and also the Medical Research Ethics Committee. By working together in a single vision, we can help to streamline and improve the ability of clinical research to be conducted in Malaysia, sponsored by not only multinational company, but also the what we call as the institution like universities across the world.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Akmal. So I think very pertinently said how the trial ecosystem is enhanced by having this facilitation by CR. Next question: what is the status of FIH, which is the first in human cell therapy clinical trials in Malaysia? Maybe Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. Cell therapy is something quite new to us, and I personally do not have any experience to undertake FIH cell therapy clinical trials at our site. I think any of these protocols would be assessed in its own individual merit by the Medical Research Ethics Committee, then to be evaluated at the site. So the site also will be assessed whether it can be conducted safely to ensure that the information obtained can be used in the scientific process and under scientific rigor. So I think on this aspect, I think this is as best as I can answer this question, Dr. Kalai.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Allen. I really felt, for the first demystifying part of this webinar, we have touched on some very important aspects of phase 1 clinical trials. We introduced the subject well, and we moved on to some questions. And obviously, we had more time here, then certainly there'll be much to explain. But I'd like to ask Dr. Akmal now to really thank our panelists and also to close the session today. And we will resume with the next webinar series on the 21st of this month, and we'll catch up more on that session. So back to you, Dr. Akmal.
Thanks, Dr. Kalai. I think all of us agree that it is a very, informative session that we have today, and a good interaction from the viewers as well. Before we go off the air, I'd like to call upon the panelists to provide a short take-home message. Maybe we start with Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Dr. Amal. I think the take-home message from our lecture is that the clinical trials environment and ecosystem in Malaysia is very healthy. I think it is a good time as any to move the clinical research agenda so that Malaysia can contribute to the pool of scientific knowledge and participate in the development of new drugs and devices to improve health outcomes for the world. Thank you.
Brilliant, Dr. Allen Fong. That's a pretty good take-home message. CK, what do you like to bring in terms of the take-home message?
To echo Dr. Allen Fong, the research that we will strive on and continue to focus on will be the research that truly matters to the local context of our local population, so that none than others we provide and generate further information to help the decision maker to make the informed decision. For that, we are open for any potential collaborations, local or otherwise international, to venture into this research that matters to the patient. Thank you. Back over to Dr.
Fantastic. I think that is gels well with the presentation earlier, which is talking about the Ravidasvir or Ravida, which has been developed from preclinical to phase 3 study and at the end of the day registered in Malaysia. May I ask Dr. Chia for your take-home message?
Thank you, Dr. Amal. So with regards to COVID-19 vaccination, I think it is very important everyone understand that vaccination is one of the key measures to bring normality back to mankind. So for those who have not registered, carry on getting registered. The rate of vaccination now is almost 1% population per day, one of the highest vaccination rate in the whole world, Malaysia. And for those who are keen to continue to participate, to be participant in the coming clinical trial in vaccines, I hope they do come forward, because we need newer data, we need other options of vaccine as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. Over to you, Dr. Karai. What's your take-home message?
I think we will have an exciting, trial ecosystem in Malaysia. We've got, the ingredients of very good clinicians. We have the facilities that allow us to undertake first-in-human trials. We have shown our expertise in the conduct of phase 1 trials, and we also facilitated, the rollout of a vaccine trial. Now, what it really puts us now is into the map of, the global trialists, and hopefully with the other, incoming trials now, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to champion Malaysia as a favorable destination in Southeast Asia, at least as in the current situation, and in the greater perspective of Asia, once the COVID-19 pandemic kind of settles down. So, we are in this together with CRF and the regulators and everyone to facilitate trial ecosystem. And I think, this is what the 3 panelists today have very elegantly, placed it in front of us. And I think on behalf of ICR, without a doubt, we owe them a great thanks in trying to get the clarity across in the last 1 hour. Thank you very much, and to all of you, we hope to see you at the next webinar, which will be on the 21st of this month, same time, and we will host it together on a different topic at a new panelist. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day and stay safe.